Hey there, it's John McLaughlin. Let's have some fun with the Follow Up Boss API. This is going to be a weekly lead audit that is sent out to your team members every single week. I have it being sent out through Slack. I'm going to show you how to set it up through Slack. It can also be sent through other platforms, whether it's Gmail, Hotmail, etc. Let's work through this in a Tarantino fashion, shall we? If you've not seen the previous video on how to set up and build out your API and get familiarized with that and the reference docs, watch that video first. The Tarantino version of this is let's start from the end and show you what it's going to look like on the finished product, and then work from the beginning to show you how to build each step out along the way. This is what's popping up now. Every single week, Friday at 9 a.m., what's going to show up in this channel in Slack is the agent's lead audit based off the particular date. It triggers at 9 a.m. And what shows up are claimed leads. This is really just a total of the hot, nurture, and watch lists from Follow Boss. And then it also will pull over the total number of overdue tasks, number of contracts, and then the previous week, the claim leads, tasks, the data from the lists, contracts, etc. And then the difference is in bolds and brackets here. For me, the problem was, again, how do I pull this data in a way that's not going to consume all my time, knowing that in Follow Up Boss, I have it set up in a way where my lists show, we'll call the priority order of which list to call from first. The hot, nurture, and watch lists, these are organized based off of the buyer or seller's motivation and time frame when they should be buying or selling. I'm not going to go in and teach that and dive into that. This helps us at least know how many people are in our database in a way to know hots should be buying or listing soon. They're not actively under contract and they're not actively listed. They're about to become a client under contract or on the market. I want to be able to know current and future business. Can I predict that? Can I control that? And then can I audit that to be able to coach and teach around best practices for getting our leads from the watch stage to the nurture stage to the hot stage to contracts? That's what the audit is supposed to do. And I'm able to show this data in a way based off of a progression week over week, and it holds everybody accountable to know if you're not doing the tasks or the actions, you're not going to have any results show up here, and we can coach to that on a deeper level. Again, let's go full Tarantino and show you the end results, the exported thread from Slack or into Slack from Zapier. This is how it looks. You're going to say, John, why is this not Follow Up Boss? Why is this Google Sheets? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because all of the data that I'm pulling from the Zapier API, I'm actually exporting all of that data to a sheet. Every one of the fields that we're looking at in the export, I can have better control over that data if it's in a singular place like this. Every week, you can see I was doing some testing back here. Now, every week, I can see at the exact same date, every week, I can see a progression in claim leads, overdue tasks, hot, nurture, watch leads, and then contracts. This, I'm going to call it raw data, is being manipulated from the Follow Up Boss API, and I'm just pushing it to a place that I can do other fun things with it later. It's much more difficult to take the other raw data from the Zapier API and add up the information. The exported content is more difficult to control. If I break it up into granular pieces, it's easier to then control later. This is a good point for reference to see that I'm adding the information to a sheet, and all of the fields that are showing up in the Slack export come from that sheet. Same thing with the previous week, because the next step here is from 17. I'm going to look up the row from the previous week, so 7 days earlier, and it's going to then pull that data into the sheet in a Google Sheet before being pushed to Slack. And then there's another calculation using the Zapier systems to calculate the difference. Let's now start from the very beginning. Every week at Friday, 9 a.m., this is the trigger that starts the rest. The trigger is just the first step in the ecosystem here. Once we have the first date come up tomorrow morning, because today's Thursday, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to trigger the next step. I have to get better control over that date field because for whatever reason, Zapier's formatter pulls in the date as this field here. And I don't like this format. This, 3 letters month, 2 numbers day, 4 numbers year. For whatever reason, other systems that use the API, it's not easy to take the data as it's presented from Zapier. So I want to format it to a field that I like and I can use in other steps. The 2 format, if I test it, show the end result, the output is how I want it. 2 numbers for month, 2 for day, 4 for year, and that's what actually will export to the audit date section here. The next step for the date formatter is I want the end result format to be similar to the European model, because again, other sites and systems, they preferred this as the export format, or how to use this format for other platforms. The 2 format, I want 4 numbers, dash 2 months, dash 2 days. And so, this is, you'll see in a second why this is important to have it like this as well. Now getting into the API, first step is for the smart list. I want to send a call to the smart list in the reference docs. I'm going to show you how to and why we're pulling this specific smart list. So this is the API reference docs for Follow-Up Boss. Get familiarized with a lot of these different calls that are available. In this case, I'm using smart lists because I'm trying to pull in the total number of leads or contacts in a particular list. And to get to that point, we have to filter through what we are querying, if you will. The amount of data that's available is significant. There's no question about that. I want to be able to only pull the smart list data for the hot smart list. You can see for the smart lists, they all have an ID, and then we have the name. What I'm caring about is the ID, because for the next step that I'm going to need to get the people that are in the hot list underneath the agent, I need to have the ID from that smart list. If I go through this get list, I can see that the ID for the hot list is 44. That's why in the Zapier call here, the smart list is for the 44 ID. Then I'm going to have the query string parameters. Think of the query string parameters as additional filters. I'm taking the list of data that's available from the entire string of data, and I'm only going to be showing information related to this particular list ID underneath these other data fields or parameters. I test that. I'm able to pull, the only data that I get as a response is the ID, because this is the important part. I want to be able to pull this data ID block, this blue-ish block. This is what becomes an insertable field that I can reference later in the Zapier chain. I only want to pull in this data field, this ID, in a future data field in Zapier. I can reference it from this particular section. It'll make sense. Don't you worry. We're going to get there. Going to do the exact same thing for the nurture list, which I can tell you is 45. That ID is 45. Doing the exact same thing here. And the result that I'm getting is this data ID, this response field is 45. We're going to come back to that. Same thing for watch. The end result is what I want. The purpose for this is I want to have uber control over just this ID field from each of these blocks within Zapier. When I reference this block in the future, I'm only going to want to pull this particular number to insert into the future. We're going to do the exact same thing with the user from within Follow-Up Boss. So the users, in comparison to Smart List, this is going to pull in all the users in my Follow-Up Boss system or account. If I go up to the users call up here, and I'm going to have the sorting by the ID because I want the numbers that pop up to be in order. And I'm going to have deleted false, doesn't matter. And I'm going to put the name of the agent that matches in Follow-Up Boss, because the query parameters, again, these are just additional filters. We only see information related to what we're trying to manipulate. Instead of all of the users, we just want the user data for Ben Poston. Let me show you, just for reference, if I pull everybody in, I get to see all the IDs. You see how Ben Poston is ID 2. We're going to come back to that. We have several other users. I only want to be able to pull data from this particular block in Zapier for Ben Poston. I want to be able to pull in his name. or his ID. And to do that, that's why in the query parameters, for the URL, I put the call for users, and the query parameters for the name matches what's available in the reference docs, which has been posted. And so when I test that, the result that I come back with, see how we have response data? This is what I want to be able to use in the future, is the ID. The name, I can use whatever else I'd like here for other steps and other purposes. I want to have uber control of just this user's ID and name in future steps. Then moving on to the people call. This is where it starts to come together. Hopefully it will come together for you. Now in the people API reference docs, we can see that there is a significant amount of information available from people that you may have not been aware of is available. We can sort it by all of these steps. In this case, I want to sort the findings here by ID because I want the numbers to be in order just for my purposes. Limit, I'll put it as 100 just because the max is 100, why not? Fields, I'm going to put all fields. Make sure that the character, whether it's cap or lowercase, matches. I want all fields here. And then I'm going to make sure include deleted is false. And also I want to make sure that the assigned to is the same agent, then posted. I'm going to go back to the Zapier in a second so you can see what I'm referring to. The assigned to is Ben Poston, and then the smart list ID is next. Smart list ID, that's 44 because that's the hot list. What this is going to then show me, well, I'll just show you what the results come back as. This is going to then show all of the people that are now in this smart list. And there should be, 5 people, because we looked at it before in Follow Boss. We can see all of the fields related to, see total here, response data, this is 5. There's 5 total leads that are in this list. Then each of the individual people here, right? Their ID, when they were created, all the data fields about each of the contacts in Follow Boss are now also findable. I don't care about these other steps for now. What I do care about is the total, because that's what I'm trying to figure out, is the total number of people that are in this hot list. So let me go back to Zapier so that the query parameters that I'm filtering, I'm only going to be seeing of all the people in my database. I only want to see people that are in this list and are assigned to this agent. That's what I want. Then the results, as you saw, give us the information that we want, which is, I want to figure out the total. The total is 5. You can do the exact same thing for nurture. Once we created this get nurture list data, we're going to make sure that becomes the field that's here, because in the future, when you find whatever your list is, I don't want to have to duplicate this and figure out which ID is it for this field, which agent is it. You do it once in the steps above, and it'll automatically populate when you copy and move these fields over. Easier to reference in the future without having to store this data elsewhere. Once we have hot, nurture, and watch for people, it's going to get even more fun, right? Now we're going to have stages. We're going to get all the stages. And once we have the stages in our system, this is going to then give us access to the names for the stages. And we see how there's 15 stages here. We want to be able to get the IDs for these stages. That's why we're doing this. It'll make sense in a second. Next, we're going to do the same thing for the people that are under contract, because under contract in the system is a stage. Once we verified the name for the stage, we can reference that again here if you wanted to. Stage is under contract. I'm now getting the people. I'm only going to be finding the total number of leads that are under contract for this assigned to agent to be able to get that information. Because again, we're going to use this field that pops up here in the future. Right now, there isn't any. There is no total. All I care about is the total for this purpose. To do that, I've got to go through the previous steps to filter out what we're finding from the API. The last piece of data we want is the overdue tasks. This gets a little bit more creative because, like we mentioned before, the very first step, the dates, the date fields for Follow Boss's API will only recognize the date if it's in this format. It just is what it is. If I'm going to go to the people side again, let me show you again on the reference docs. We're going to go to people. Assigned to is Ben. Is completed. Where is that? Is completed. This is tasks. That's why I confuse myself. I have get people. This is, wow. For you to be able to ID your fields correctly, this is a good, make sure you do this in the future. We have get people. This is not correct. This is get tasks. So we don't waste our time searching for things and videos that are necessary. Let's now go to the tasks. And we're gonna get, all right, assigned to Ben Poston. We're gonna have the is completed. Here we go, is false, due. This is going to be overdue. And then for the due end, find tasks that are due from this time and before. We're gonna make sure we have the date in here as 2024, as today's date, because that's the date that populates from Follow Up Boss or from the Zapier poll. Again, all I care about is the total. If I do a response or do a total, 57. That's what I care about here, the total. That information will then come back in the Zapier poll. Total, I'm not gonna run a test because the numbers are all off. The total that pops up is what I want, which is 50 in this case. It's changed since I last ran a test. I'm not gonna waste time here. Now that we have all the total fields from each of these steps able to be referenced, what we're gonna then do is we're gonna think of the end in mind. How do I want my audit thread to look? I wanna first total up the hot, nurture, and watch leads. If I go back into the formatter by Zapier, take the number section, and I wanna add up the hot, nurture, and watch responses from 8, 9, 10. Take the responses from 8, 9, and 10, and the result, the output is 66. Then, once I have not only the hot, nurture, and watch totals, and I have the stage totals, and I have the total claim leads totals, I'm gonna add a row. Putting it all together now, it's gonna make sense very quickly. We have the Google Sheet, we're gonna have the user name, the audit date, because this is a date that I want to show up in the sheet and the format like so. Claim leads is the total from step 14 of hot, nurture, and watch. Overdue tasks, we pull in the total from step 13. Hot, nurture, and watch, we pull in the response total for each of the hot, nurture, and watch for 8, 9, and 10. And then under contract, same thing, the total for number 12. That's what we're looking for here. And those data points are what are pushed into the sheet. See, we have from 12/14 is when I last ran that test. That's what shows up here. Now, before I get to the finish line and I push it over to Slack, because we have not pushed it to Slack yet, I need to have now the difference as well as pulling the data from the previous week in the spreadsheet. So you don't have to get this crazy and show the previous week data. If you just want to show the current week, fine, you're done with how it is now. If you want to take it a step further, like I did here, show the previous week's lead data, then you would do these next steps, which is you're gonna then find the formatter, and we're gonna go and take the output from the first step, and we're gonna change the output to 7 days before, because we wanna be able to pull the data 7 days prior because we're getting it from the sheet in this next step. We're gonna have a date field that's gonna populate, which is 7 days before the date of the run. And we're gonna look up a row in the Google Sheet that has that exact date, that lookup value. Whatever the output is from 16, it's gonna look up that date from the sheet. Remember before in step 15, the output was from the 14th. We're gonna then show the output from the last test that ran here. The output is the lookup value in the sheet is this date. Once we have the lookup date, we're gonna find all the data from that particular row. It's not gonna show up here because the date was different. When I last ran this poll, for example, the results showed based off of the date, the data fields showed up accordingly. Then I'm gonna subtract the information from each of these. In 17, we're gonna take from a week earlier where were the claim leads, then we're gonna take current claim leads and we're gonna subtract them based off of this math operation. The result is 1. That's the difference. This becomes its own data field set for the final push into Slack. Same thing, we're gonna now take the overdue tasks from the 7 days earlier lookup row Google Sheet, same thing. We're gonna take that overdue task field and then we're gonna subtract from the current week. The output result is gonna be a field for the final result. Same thing, we're gonna subtract the total number of hots and nurtures and watches and under contracts And that gets us now to the very end result, which we already showed you, which was all of the fields. So for claim leads from the current week, should probably label this for your benefit too. Current week, Google Sheet export, and then have this be previous week, Google Sheet export. 15 is the current week for leads, tasks, hot nurture watch, contracts. Previous week, 17, we have the fields that were exported that were pulled from this sheet originally. And then we have the difference, which we see here from 16, 18, 19. This is just subtracting these two dates. Then wherever you want these results to go, for me, I just chose Slack. You can have this go anywhere you want, send it out through email, however you'd like. This is now a field that will update in real time based off of whatever the data set that exists in Follow Up Boss at the time when it's pulled. That data will run through. It takes about, like you can see here, about 2 minutes. So it exported at 9:02. It takes about 2 minutes for the system to pull in all this data and map it up correctly so that it pushes out what you want. Not too shabby. It's a lot of steps. If you have any questions, feel free to post in the comments. If you've watched this far and heard my voice this long, kudos to you. Stay tuned for more tips on the API for Follow Up Boss, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks.